And for anybody who hasn't met you yet, I'd just love to have your background and how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking me to share. And I always say buckle up. I share my story. I actually I like to come at it from just a really grounded place. I do find, a lot in this space, people like to exaggerate or like they're past their stories. And I really don't need to do that with mine. It was such an intense past that yeah, I really want to come at it from just a really grounded place. And just to start, I struggled with alcohol and drug addiction starting at a really young age. So I started using cocaine by the age of 15 years old. And throughout my teen years, I was involved in a lot of criminal activity. Very chaotic. I started to date my drug dealer when I was 17 years old. And from the period of 17 to 20, it was very much a blur. I lost a lot of people in my friend group to homicide, suicide, and drug overdoses and car accidents. And I ended up writing my best friend's eulogy at 20 years old. And a month later, I got pregnant with my daughter.
Mm.
So I often say that my daughter really truly was just this angel and this blessing in my life who just really came to incarnate on this earth to help guide me and just really helped me turn my life around in a lot of ways. I wish that I could say that the behaviors and the patterns stopped there. They didn't. But I definitely took a major turn when I did get pregnant with her. So I ended up getting rid of my phone during that time completely. So I cut off like my contact with all my friends group, ended up having my daughter on my own. And during my pregnancy, I started to really get into a lot of like spiritual and personal development. So I would just spend so much time in my room because I didn't have any friends at that time, just reading a lot of personal development books and spiritual books. And that really helped me get through that time. And I really just wanted to be a good mother and turn my life around. And so I had my daughter, and yeah, I stayed sober for about a year and a half. And it was always drugs that were the major problem for me. Like I never really cared for alcohol in my teen years. I
Mm.
basically had a few drinks just to start, using drugs. Like that was my pattern. So I never thought that alcohol could be a problem for me because it just wasn't something that I craved or really felt like I struggled with. It was more so drugs in high school. And so I did start drinking again a year and a half into it. But the thing with me is I don't know moderation. So it's like I go from 0 to 60
Mhm.
and I could walk away from it from long periods of time. But it was always like blackouts and binge drinking throughout my 20s. And so, old patterns, they die hard. And, my nervous system was really, truly wired for chaos because I never did any deep trauma healing work from all that I had been through in my teen years. It was basically just like, Kate, change the behavior, like get away from that stuff, walk away from it. And I just need distance and everything will be good. But I didn't actually get to the root. I didn't do any deep trauma healing work. And so I was still drawn to, behaviors, circumstances, people that created a lot of chaos in my life because chaos felt like calm and calm felt like chaos is often what I say. It just felt so familiar. And so I found myself in a relationship at the age of 27 years old to a man who I believed was going to be like the love of my life. It moved really quick. He was super charming. And I knew at that time that he also struggled. So he did struggle with PTSD. He was a war veteran. So he did do 2 tours in Afghanistan. So he was battling his own demons and dysregulation. And I knew that going into the relationship. But I ignored all these little red flags. Like there were those little red flags of him like going through my phone early on in the relationship. But I just bypassed that because he was really charming and I thought I was in love with him. And so it moved really quick, and I moved in with him pretty early on in our relationship. And by 6 months into the relationship, it turned into a horror movie.
Mm.
And I really want to make sure, because I've done so much work around this whole period of my life over the past several years. And by no means do I ever want to demonize him because, it makes perfect sense from his background, what he had been through, and not to at all dismiss those behaviors because it was really horrible to go through, but also just an understanding of like when you struggle with severe trauma and severe wounding and you add drugs and alcohol to the mix, you're not going to be a good person. And I definitely wasn't a good human being, I don't believe, when I was using drugs or alcohol, right? Like deep down, I was. But they cloud your judgment. And I often described it as if a demon took over my body and I couldn't control myself. And that's just very much what happened in that relationship. It was very chaotic and it turned very violent. And so I was very badly injured multiple times. And it was also just very psychologically and emotionally abusive. And I ended up just cutting off contact with a lot of friends. Like people just gave up on me. It was too hard for them to watch. I barely saw my family members. And so things just began to spiral and my drinking got out of control. And I ended up having alcohol in my system 24/7 by the last couple of years of that relationship. I'd be outside the liquor mart at like 10 a.m. every single day waiting for it to open because my hands were shaking so bad. I couldn't even wait to drive home. I had to chug straight out of the bottle. I was hiding bottles in my purse when I would go to work. So it was really, really, yeah, just a really bad situation. Got completely out of control. And I ended up having a bad fall and I badly injured myself. So I broke my right tib and fib and sprained my left ankle. And I ended up in a wheelchair for a little while. And that was a huge wake up call for me because at that point, I could really see how abusive the relationship really was because it actually got worse at that point. And I could even stand up and defend myself. So I knew when I got out of the wheelchair that I had to leave, I had to get sober. And at this point, I wanted nothing more to be sober. So I did not enjoy drinking. I wanted to stop so badly, but I couldn't because it was just such a physiological problem. So yeah, by that point, I just knew I was going to leave the relationship. And I did. And I left with nothing. And I moved into an empty apartment with no belongings, one bed and a mattress. And I lost my job just a couple weeks later. So that was like my rock bottom. And shortly after that, I had one more relapse. And so what that looked like was I went missing for about 7 days in total, I believe it was. And no one could get a hold of me. And I ended up waking up in the back seat of my car. This was in the middle of winter. It was like minus 40 outside. Luckily, I left my car running all night, but I couldn't get out of my car. And I was stuck in there for like 12 hours. And so, yeah, I called my brother from the vehicle and he's like, you just need to try and get inside. I don't even know how I made it home, but he told me I just need to try and get inside to my apartment. So I got into my apartment. I called my dad because the suicidal thoughts were just so intense. And I was really scared I was going to jump out my apartment window. And it basically, I was experiencing two voices. One was telling me to jump out my window or to go to the LC and get more liquor, or just another voice was telling me just to lie down and stay put. And it was like this back and forth of me walking back and forth to my window, to my bed, to my window, to my bed. And then finally, I just heard this loud voice saying, like, lie down and wait. And I did. And all of a sudden, I just felt a sense of peace, a sense of calmness wash all over me. Those voices disappeared. And it was a beginning of a really intense spiritual awakening at that point. And I stayed put, and my dad came over, and there was bottles of alcohol all over my apartment, and it was really hard for him to see. And he stayed with me. I went to my parents' house for a few days. I knew I was done drinking at that point. I knew I needed to get help. And yeah, that was the last time I ever touched alcohol. And so I started a 12-step program and things. I won't get too much into my healing process, but yeah, that was the beginning of my healing journey, was hitting that rock bottom, and also the beginning of a very profound spiritual awakening. So that's a really condensed version of like a very chaotic 16 years, but that's basically the cliff notes of it.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot. Yeah. That's hard. A couple of questions are like, where was your daughter during that time? Like after you met this abusive man?
Yeah, and great question. And a lot of people ask that, and I'm glad that you do, because I don't like to shy away from that conversation. That was so hard for me to have to, of course, deal with and look at. Luckily, my parents were very involved in her life during that time. And the last couple of years in that relationship, things just spiraled with my addiction. And my parents ended up having her quite a bit during that time. I still was, obviously, she's still with me like half the time. I was also working evenings quite a bit. But yeah, my parents definitely took her a lot just because my addiction was so out of control.
Yeah.
Before that, of course, she was with me, and our relationship is mended now, and we have a really beautiful relationship. But I definitely was not a good mother during those last couple of years.
Well, thankfully you had some support. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's people out there that don't even have that.
Oh, definitely. Very grateful for that. I have good parents.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, where do you think those tendencies came from? Like the addiction and all of those things, right? So, like you mentioned, you had really good parents. Usually we attribute those things to like childhood trauma. What
Mhm.
have you kind of uncovered there?
Yeah. And I've done so much work around that for sure. So, my parents had really difficult childhoods. So, addiction runs on both sides of my family. So, I actually really don't know my dad's side of the family very well. A lot of addiction on that side, and my mom's side as well. So, definitely very ancestral. My siblings didn't struggle. Like, I come from a family of 6 kids. So, I was the middle. I always had a really severed relationship with my mom. Like, I did not have a close relationship with my mom. And I really struggled with mental health issues at a young age. So, like 11, 12 years old, like just severe anxiety and depression. And my parents were very overwhelmed during that time. Like, they had 6 kids. My mom ran a daycare. My dad was really busy, and I was isolated a lot with what I was going through. So, using substances became a coping mechanism for me.
Mhm.
So I always say that the substances were not a problem. Like, they were my solution to the problem. The problem was what I was trying to regulate and soothe myself from. So a lot of it was, yeah, a lot of struggles with anxiety and depression. We can look at it and say it was, yeah, deeply ancestral for sure. Of course, there was, no parents are perfect. There's no perfect parent out there. No one's done a perfect job at all. And my parents weren't perfect, but they were great people,
Mhm.
and they did the best that they could. And so there definitely was some ruptures, in attachment for sure, which I really truly do believe that I've healed a lot of. But yeah, that I would say more so deeply ancestral.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because you mentioned being a Pisces rising. It's a lot of Piscean energy. And I know kind of like the low octave of Pisces is addiction.
Mm.
So that could be kind of part of it, right? Like it's interesting because we talk a lot about, all of these experiences that like shaped us. But I think in a lot of cases too, like this was actually the story that was written for us. And even when it's extremely difficult, maybe our role was to come and transmute these experiences to go down that path of the wounded healer. Yeah, because I know
Definitely.
for myself, like being a Pisces moon, that's like my internal world. And I've definitely struggled with substances as well, like all throughout my 20s. I mean, I started using cocaine when I was 17, 16, and dated my drug dealer as well. And so much chaos throughout my 20s. And so I definitely empathize with that. I definitely didn't experience as much chaos when it comes to those types of abusive relationships, but have experienced some on the other spectrum where it's just more psychological and emotional. And that Piscean energy too is very empathic. And what I'm finding is when you're really open and porous, like it just kind of I don't know, you just want to merge with people. And for some reason, it's like low density energy can be attracted to what seems, bright and sparkly and empathic. Those are just themes that I'm kind of unraveling right now with my current circumstances. But yeah, I don't know. I just think it's interesting when you kind of piece all of those things together.
Oh, definitely. It's very complex,
Hmm.
for sure, right?
Yeah.
To really look at, yeah, what is underneath driving these patterns, and was it, just a conscious soul decision to come into even these family lines and to help clear them. And I'm also careful when I don't say that, because when I say that, to not make it an excuse for my own behavior, because I definitely take personal responsibility for the mistakes that I've done in my life. But at the same time, there's truth to that as well, right? So I don't look at people who struggle with substances as bad people. We were actually just really trying to cope with overwhelming pain, right? So I don't look at I don't pathologize substance use or addiction. Prefer the using the term problematic substance use. I don't pathologize that. It's not, I don't use a disease model, and I don't look at them like they're bad people by any means. They're just doing what they need to do to cope with the circumstances that they're dealing with.
Yeah. What does the path of the wounded healer mean to you?
Yeah, I was sharing with you that I felt really drawn to that archetype for quite
Mhm.
some time. And for me, it's using our pain and turning it into a purpose to help others, move through what they're going through in their own life. So it is so important when we go through traumatic experiences or we overcome hardships like that to be of service and to find purpose in it and to find meaning when we're ready to. I think it's also really important not to rush that. One thing that I do see and is very common when we do go through, just traumatic experiences in our life is to want to go help others right away. That's also the shadow of the wounded healer, to avoid doing our own healing work. My invitation is like when we go through struggles and pain, like just focus on your own healing first so that you can be like solid and embodied in the work that you do. And then that will just naturally unfold helping other people. One thing I often see, which is the shadow of the wounded healer, is like wanting to rush that process. So it's a way to like focus on others rather than focus on self, focus on helping it to heal others and to fix others, to take away from our own unhealed pain.
Mhm.
So there's a shadow aspect to all these different archetypes too, but then there's also the beautiful light of it of using what you went through for good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it feels like, I don't know, in my case, it's like, well, all of these hard things that I've had to go through, if I can at least share what I've learned, it just creates some sort of purpose for it all. And I know it does, these are initiations and they do bring you to like higher octaves and new experiences. But I mean, it's still hard.
Yeah.
It's still, it feels unfair sometimes. But yeah, I think that's what kind of gives me a little bit of peace on my path is knowing that there's like this connection that can be created and community and support and helping other people. And yeah, it seems like that's kind of what you've found in your work too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
Mm.
Yeah. And I love that, just sharing your experience and healing through storytelling, which is something that we really need to, and we are seeing it like starting to come back around. A lot of Indigenous elders, that's why they share stories.
Mm.
We learn through just hearing other people's stories through storytelling. And I think that's really beautiful that you're sharing that. And it takes a lot of courage, right, to share these experiences for sure.
Hmm. I have to tell you about something I created that's been changing people's lives. It's called Brainbow from Mindful Meds. I formulated it with a special saffron extract that has a ton of clinical evidence showing it's as effective as SSRIs for mood support, but without the side effects. The feedback has been insane. More calm, sharper thinking, deeper focus without jitters, and even restful sleep with resilient mornings. One person told us, I'm a machine on this Brainbow. And another said they were actually crying because their brain felt so clear. If you want to experience it for yourself, head to mindfulmeds.io and use the code WILDMIND for 15% off your first order. Details are also in the show notes. Yeah, I know. I remember I had a mentor. I went to this wildcraft forest school a few years ago now, and one of the themes was storytelling and how potent that is. And it's interesting because it really kind of is a lost art. Like we have all of this content now and a lot of podcasts and things, but I think these real accounts and, you know, listening to real stories of things that people have gone through, there's just so much medicine in that.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. And then we don't feel so alone, right? Like we heal through shared experiences. We
Mhm.
truly do. That's the reason why the 12-step program is so not successful for everyone, but for, a large group of people it really truly is because it's people with lived experience.
Yeah.
that actually can truly understand what you're going through. So it removes the judgment. And you're more likely to talk to someone where you don't feel judged, but rather understood by them,
Hmm.
than going to someone where you feel like you might be judged, or that not even that they might judge you, but they won't fully understand you because they haven't lived underneath it. Understand means to stand underneath it.
Yeah. 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 That's a beautiful reflection. Let's talk about your healing journey. So we know about the crisis. Let's unpack what kind of got you on a new path, what that looked like.
Yeah. So I'll start off with major personal responsibility,
Hmm.
right? So when I had that spiritual awakening, it was like I couldn't unsee how I was hurting so many people in my life, including myself. Like that was part of that, having that spiritual awakening. It was like all of a sudden, just like everything started to like surface. And I just started having these just really deep reflections. And I don't even like to call them like epiphanies, but I was really able to see how much harm I was causing to myself and to others. And it also was really supportive to start the 12-step program. So that was the beginning of my journey. And there's definitely, I'm not a huge advocate for going to 12 steps. And I don't even think that that's necessary. I'm not like a hardcore 12 stepper, but it was really helpful for me actually in the first year and a half because, that first year and a half, I wasn't in a place to start processing what I went through. Like I was very ungrounded. I needed structure and I needed discipline and I needed someone just to kind of tell me what I should be doing initially because I was so disconnected from self. And so often we see, and I'm all for this because this is the work that I do of guiding people home to themselves. Absolutely. Right. Like we always want to be empowered, and always the purpose and the goal of doing any type of healing work is to bring you home to yourself. But initially, like when you have gone through so much trauma and you're recovering from addiction, you don't know who you are. Like
Mhm.
I didn't know who I was. It was so overwhelming. So to be in a room with a group of people who had been there and were sharing their stories so courageously. And I respected this group of people so much because they weren't just sharing, their own traumas and what had happened to them. It was very much personal responsibility, which is what I needed to do initially. That was such an important piece. Then I could get to a place, a little bit later on my journey of really starting to process what I had been through. And I'm glad that I did it that way because I did find that if I focused too much on my own suffering, I could get over identify with my own wounds and get too lost in the suffering. So the personal responsibility piece was really important at first, but also important not to like blame ourselves because I did notice the shadow aspect of that because there's a shadow to everything. The shadow aspect of the personal responsibility was I started to become more rigid and I started to become more hard and I was really hard on myself. And that didn't help me process the shame. So once I had that structure and that stability in place, then I was able to get deeper into, processing my trauma, which was through somatic work, deep somatic work, because I started to realize how disconnected I was from my body. I was never in my body. I didn't feel safe around anyone. I didn't really have any deep, intimate relationships with people. I didn't know how to be in a relationship. So, learning about my attachment styles, I'm starting to really dive into attachment healing, somatic healing, working with my nervous system. That was like the next step for me. And then from there, I gradually went into starting to actually microdose with psilocybin, just very small doses. And that really complemented the work that I was doing when it came to self reflection, working with my nervous system, and doing a lot of also doing shadow work. So I'm a huge fan of Jungian psychology as well. So doing psycho spiritual work was really important too. So there were so many different pieces of my recovery, but I really devoted my life to the work, like
Yeah.
devoted my life to just becoming a better person, not healing as if I was broken and needed to be fixed, but I really just wanted to show up better in all my relationships and in my life and in my purpose. So I really devoted my life to that. And I've still devoted my life to that. And now my healing journey has really progressed. Like it looks different. I have started to incorporate every now and then larger doses of psilocybin, which I do. I've only done in ceremony with a licensed clinician,
Mhm.
somatic psychologist who has worked in this field for decades. So really just being cautious and treading lightly around that as well. But that's an area that I'm starting to dive into, and it's been really supportive for me. making sure that I have plenty of space for integration in between. And sweat lodges have been huge for me. Like that's actually been
Mm.
my favorite part of my healing journey has been attending sweat lodges. I go every Thursday.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, I actually highly recommend for anyone. I really do believe now that that should be like a starting point.
Mm.
If you're, especially if you're planning on doing any type of ceremonial work, I can't even tell you like the shifts that I've been experiencing just being there, just listening and learning, not going to extract, but just going there with like reverence. And it's been a humbling experience for me. And
Mm.
one of the things that I've really learned by attending these sweats, like the lodge keeper, when, you know, when we're in ceremony, it's the very last door that we say a prayer for ourselves. But all the other three doors, it's like praying to our ancestors, praying for others, giving reverence, you know, giving thanks to the grandfather rocks, to the spirit helpers, to the fire. It's just very much about like reverence and, you know, reciprocity, not extraction or taking. And then it's like the last door you can say a prayer for yourself. And just that lesson alone, I've just
Mhm.
been applying that to life and realize how much I try and extract. You know,
Mhm.
it's just our culture, we take, we extract, even in nature. Like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm gonna go out on this beautiful hike and enjoy nature and take in her beauty. But what do we give back to her? You know? So that to me has just been some beautiful lessons. And I really wish that I had started doing that work sooner.
Okay. I love that you mentioned this. I have not been to a traditional sweat, but I don't know. I'm just getting like a full bodied, like, this is something that I need to do right now. Tell me a little bit more about it. Like, is it really intense in terms of like the heat and like I'm still kind of sensitive, healing nervous system stuff. So I don't know how much I can tolerate when it comes to that, but tell me.
Totally, totally. And I know that every single lodge is different, depending
Hmm.
on how the lodge keeper runs them. The one that I've gone to that I've been invited to, which I'm so grateful for, what I've learned through them, and I'll make sure that I'm speaking through their lens because it's not my culture. So they always to it the door, like if you need to leave, you're not going to be stuck in there for like the two
Okay.
hour long sweat. So it's usually about 2 hours long. They get hot. So like my first 2 to 3 were honestly really intense. I lie
Mhm.
down. So it's like pitch dark. If there's space, you can definitely lie down. So the first 2 to 3, I lie down. I found those really, really intense. People did leave. So it's very common for people, if it's their first, to maybe stay for one door and then leave for the others. But now, after doing several, it's a lot easier. So
Yeah.
now I can actually sit through them, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so I'll kind of go through how they run them. So they have, yeah, the sacred fire with the grandfather rocks in the fire outside the lodge. And then, you know, we all get on our hands and knees and we go into the lodge and sing songs and prayers. And it's pitch dark. And yeah, there's 4 doors that they'll open. And so every single door will represent something different. I believe it's different for every single lodge and they're about 2 hours long. Yeah, it's intense, but one thing that I've noticed is I'm starting to cultivate a relationship with the spirits of the lodge. That's what they say will often happen if you continue to go and you continue to commit and you show up humbly. I can tell you that it's been a humbling experience because I didn't know what I was doing at first. And
Hmm.
also just know that you won't know, right? Like, because it
Yeah.
was easy. So I had to be told because I didn't know. Like, I remember my first time I was getting up, leaving the lodge and I stood up. And the lodge keeper was like, Alyssa, humble yourself before grandfather rocks. And I was like, oh, and I got down on my knees. Like I didn't
Yeah.
know, right? So
Yeah.
it's been a learning experience. So just know that those things are going to happen because we just
Yeah.
don't know. But you learn through it. And yeah, but now it's like, it's so interesting because I was supposed to go yesterday, but they had to cancel it. And I noticed my body entering ceremony because it's so used to going on Thursdays. So I noticed
Um,
myself on Thursday entering into an altered state of consciousness like all of a sudden just feeling this heat and feeling, you know, like that I have one foot in this world and one foot in the other, like starting to enter into that state because my body's so used to entering into ceremony.
yeah.
So it's really cool because now when I enter the lodge, now I'm starting to actually see, I don't know, spirits, I guess you would call them, but just like the light around certain people when we're doing ancestral prayers. Yeah, it's pretty cool. You start to build a relationship with the spirits of the lodge.
Wow. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, it's all these little things are kind of coming together for me right now. It's really interesting. My uncle, passed away when I was around 19 years old. So my dad's brother. And he struggled with alcohol addiction for quite some time. And when he got sober, he ended up connecting with a First Nations group on Vancouver Island and became a very integral part of their community. So many people from that community showed up to his funeral and were just absolutely devastated by the loss of my uncle. And at this time in my life, like I had not been exposed to anything spiritual. I knew that he did yoga sometimes, which was like kind of weird. Like it's really unfortunate that I wasn't able to have that relationship with him later in life when started to become interested in these kind of things. But I know he would do sweats quite often. And after he passed away, we were clearing some items out of his home. And that was kind of when I found like these first spiritual pieces that I was interested in. Like he had a beautiful abalone shell and some sage and like a talisman pouch and yeah, just all of this stuff. And I was like, who is this guy? It was almost like he was leading a totally different life. And it makes sense because no one in my family would have understood that, right? Like me being interested in so many esoteric things, I'm like the strange one. But I think he was very much into that. And a lot of ancestral themes are starting to come into my life right now. And I feel like that's kind of the energy that I want to start focusing on because it's not something that I really have before. From time to time, like I had an altar and I would have a photo of my uncle and my grandpa. But yeah, I think there's something really important there that we're missing. And we are so disconnected as settlers on this land to our traditions. And yeah, it's interesting. And it's unfortunate that we kind of have to like borrow other traditions, but at least it's something. It's like a starting point, you know?
Well, I love that you mentioned that. I'll even give a suggestion for the listeners if they're interested in ancestral trauma. Danielle Four, I've been taking some of his courses. He's unbelievable. He has a book on ancestral trauma and like reconnecting back to your own lineages because it is so important. Like, I do believe it's so important to honor the indigenous communities. This is their land and, to learn from them, but also not to take.
Mhm.
Right. So it's like when I attend those sweat lodges, I'm going there just to learn, but I'm not taking anything from them and using it for myself outside of the lodge. We have our own, traditions and our own lineages, and it's really important to repair that and to reconnect to that. And ancestral trauma has been probably the most pivotal piece on my healing journey, more so than doing inner child work, than healing my own attachment wounds. Because even when I did all that work, it was this piece that was missing. So
Mm.
like this has just been so pivotal. I was in Costa Rica at an Ottman experience hosted by Dr. Jesse Hansen. He's one of the world's most renowned somatic psychologists. He's absolutely incredible. He was the interventionist on the TV show Intervention for 4 years.
Okay.
And so anyways, this was my second time attending. I went in April and we do work in small groups and we do deep somatic processing. So we did 1 day of psilocybin. Not everyone has to take psilocybin and not everybody did, but most of the work is deep somatic processing. So this was wild. We started to do work in small groups. So he got us to start to do role playing. And my partner was playing one of my parents, our caregiver, and I was the child.
Hi, friends. I've got something exciting for you. Rewilding Humanity Unfiltered is now on Patreon with a 7-day free trial. This is a portal where you'll get bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes updates, early access to new content, and a private community where we go deeper into the conversations from the show. Supporting the show is like buying me one latte a month, and it makes such a big difference in keeping this work alive and growing. So if the podcast has been meaningful to you, I'd love for you to try it out. Just hit the link in the show notes to start your free 7-day trial today. I can't wait to see you there.
And when we were in that process, it brought up something super intense for me. They actually said, because I was playing the child, my partner was playing my mom, and then he's like, hey, now stand up. And now your parent is your romantic partner and you're an adult. Like just kind of showing how, we carry those patterns through into our adult life. And that triggered something so deep for me to the point where I actually dropped to the ground. This is like not ingesting anything. So this is completely sober. And so he looks at me, like he's just incredible, but he looks at me and he's like, go into it. And then I started to like hyperventilate, like I couldn't breathe. And he came over to me and he brought his whole team over and he's like, hey, everyone, like basically surround her. I can't really fully remember what was happening. It was so wild. But I went into the fetal position. He put his hand on my back and he's like, name the part that's present. Name it. For me, it was scared. And I didn't even know, like, this was just coming out of me. Like, these are these parts that were coming up if you're familiar with parts work. So I said, scared. And then he spoke to me. I don't remember what he said, but I just started to scream and I went through a whole somatic release. And people were like, who were there? It was like, it triggered other people's stuff because you're witnessing that. And then it brought up emotions for everyone. I've never experienced something like that, just completely sober, not ingesting anything, to go through a full somatic release. But anyways, when we went deeper into our small group work, what was coming up for me was ancestral. And I like have done so much work on my own personal stuff over the years. This ancestral stuff was the heaviest that I've ever experienced. Like I've experienced such intense grief. And it was so interesting because as I'm going through my process of moving through my own ancestral stuff, I had someone playing the role of my daughter, someone playing the role of me, someone playing the role of my mom, and someone playing the role of my grandma. So like family constellations.
Yeah.
But his own twist on it. So as we're doing this, 3 birds flew in and perched up and were watching me as I'm going through my own process. And as we finished the process and closed it, 1 bird flew away. And to me, that was symbolizing like my daughter, like breaking off because I've healed that, for for the lineage. So it was really profound. But I actually believe that when you're ready, because it's like, we're not meant to skip steps. So this is for the listeners. Don't think that you need to go right into ancestral trauma. It could be pretty intense. And I definitely recommend just starting to do research, Danielle 4, just start to really get a sense of earth honoring practices and honoring your ancestors before you get into the deeper healing work, because it can bring up a lot of stuff. And definitely focus on your own stuff from this life first. Like that's super important. But yeah, it's very potent. And I actually believe that has more to do with like our patterns than even just like our own personal stuff personally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you think of it just through the lens of epigenetics, right? So that's something that's being talked a lot more about from like a scientific lens, but that's basically the same thing, right? So it's like, yeah.
Well, so like your mom already had all of her eggs fully developed when she was in your grandmother's womb. So it's like you were in your grandmother's womb. And there's actually a really good book called It Didn't Start With You, Inherited Family Trauma, How It Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle, by Mark Wallen, who is also absolutely incredible. If you want to look into ancestral work, that's a really good place to start. Danielle 4 is a little bit deeper. It's more about like ancestral reverence and connecting with your ancestors, like from a spiritual lens. And I would say Mark Wallen is more on like the somatic and like neuroscience lens, if you want to go there.
Cool. Yeah. Oh man, I don't know. I'm so glad we're having this conversation today. I feel like this is like a new path that I need to be looking at for sure. And a lot of us. And it's interesting because it's like, it would make sense that that's foundational in a sense, like even if it's just introductory, right? Because we're talking about like what happened before. And a lot of times we'll go, like, for example, do a big plant medicine journey when you're already like super dysregulated. I love that you shared that you started with microdosing. And I think you use Mindful Meds products, don't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Because starting there and building a relationship with the plant before you go, or not a plant, but a mushroom, before you start doing the bigger journeys. Like it's really important to like be extracting some like these layers of trauma before we go in and do a big journey, because that is additive to the nervous system because you can end up having really shitty experiences like I've had in the past. But yeah, how has microdosing supported you, do you feel, in your journey? And it sounds like you're not just taking it just to take it and fix it, but like you're doing work in conjunction.
Definitely, like deep integration work. It's been super supportive. When I first started microdosing, like it wasn't like I was taking it all the time or every day. So initially, when I first started, I think I took it for only, how long would it have been? Maybe 6 to 8 weeks. And then I didn't take it for a really long time. But when I was taking it, I was using it alongside doing deep somatic healing work. And it's been huge for me. Like it's been a tool. I always say it's a tool.
Yeah.
It's not going to heal you, it's a teacher. So we can actually use them as tools. I find it just really supportive. For me, it's like, I always explain it like, so when I was in the problem, like when I used cocaine and alcohol, I hated psychedelics. I did not want to do psychedelics because it made me
Ah,
see my shit. It brought up like so much shame for me. Yeah. So that's why I'm not even concerned about like incorporating that being, being away from using cocaine and alcohol, because for me, it was like, it made me see stuff that I didn't want to see. And so for me, especially doing large doses, when I do a large dose, I don't want to do that for a long time. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to take some space from that and I'm going to process and I'm going to integrate that. And it's nice because microdosing, it's so subtle, so
Mhm.
subtle. And it helps me tap into those subtleties within my own body. So going out into nature and like doing deep somatic practices, it just can help me go a little bit deeper, helps me self-reflect, helps me see things that maybe, our busy day-to-day lives when we're so like always rushing around that we don't give ourselves the space to actually process. So I definitely use it as a tool very intentionally.
Yeah, I love that. Let's talk about somatic practices. Like, what type of practices do you do on your own? What does somatic work look like if somebody were to work with you?
Yeah, it's important to say that, many people when they're looking to get into somatic work, they're, just booking a session with a somatic practitioner. That's not going to be enough. Like just doing a 1 hour practice with a somatic practitioner once a week is not going to be enough. You have to be consistent with these little practices. And they're actually very subtle and very simple, but they are profound and they work if you're consistent with them. And so I always say I'm not a somatic experiencing practitioner, though I've taken quite a bit of Peter Levine's trainings. And so I do incorporate some of those practices into my work. And the beginning is actually just starting off very slow, starting to just ground, starting to, even for some people, this is important to mention, going into your body can feel very overwhelming for a lot of people at first because their body was not a safe place to be in. So for some people it does. Like some people are really good with starting to, go into their inner landscape, notice their sensations, notice their emotions, notice the stories, going through the 5 levels of awareness. That's a beautiful place to get to. But for a lot of people, they're not even there yet because they've experienced such severe trauma and their body hasn't been a safe place. So the best place to start is honestly just doing simple grounding practices of being outside, just noticing the feeling of the ground beneath you, like supporting you, like really feeling and anchoring into that. Noticing your own body boundaries, like you're, starting from your hand, noticing how your hand feels, like really getting into the sensation of your hand without closing your eyes. Going like up and down your arms, your legs, like starting with your legs and your arms, not going right into like, your emotions or your heart space or your internal sensations that can be very overwhelming for some people. So just starting off small and also orienting to your surroundings. So starting to show your body that it's safe in the present moment. So like even just a really, really simple practice is just starting to slowly turn your head to the left and just allowing your eyes to gaze around the room, take in your surroundings, letting your eyes fall on certain points of the room, on certain textures, certain things that you see, and then slowly turning back to the center and doing the other side. Orienting is a really powerful exercise. You can find a lot of these practices too online. Like you can
Mhm.
go onto YouTube and you can find ton. I always recommend try different ones and see what works for you, but it's consistency.
Mhm.
So why a lot of people get frustrated and they say somatic healing doesn't work is because they're not consistent with it, and you have to be. And
Mhm.
it's going to feel boring. And if
Yeah.
it's like a practice of being able to just sit with yourself and come back to the present moment, and you're going to think it's stupid. Like even when I started, I'm like, really? This is going to help me heal my trauma?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. But it honestly, it worked for me. So yeah.
Yeah. When I went through my extreme dark night of the soul with my nervous system crash, we'll call it, I was led to a program called Primal Trust, I believe. And so there was a lot of somatic practices there. I was also seeing a somatic therapist, and it is very slow work. And I found it was really difficult for me. Like, I mean, I really had nothing else going on because I had lost everything. Like, I lost my home, wasn't working, like, couldn't get out of bed. And so I would just like put these notes in my phone and my calendar because my calendar was wide open, which was such a weird thing for me because I went from like having a bajillion things on my list at one point to like nothing. But it would be like to do some of the exercises every day. And it was, yeah, eye movements, toning,
Yep.
right? Toning the vagus nerve. Yeah, small movements. And they would help, but like my system was just so extremely overwhelmed that it would help for a second and then it was like back to square one. Yeah. So my case was so extreme that unfortunately I ended up having to go to the hospital. But I think it's a beautiful practice for anybody that is functional, right? And wants to heal the nervous system. These are things that you can just do on your own.
Totally, totally. And that's the thing. It's like every situation is so different. There's no tool or modality that works for everybody. And that in a lot of cases too, it's like you need that support of working with someone else too, right? Like our body doesn't even feel safe to do these exercises, or we like dissociate and disconnect right away.
Mhm.
It is important to mention that. Like even we see a lot of people having these profound releases, and I've had them myself, but it took a while to get up to that point, and that's not something we want to rush. I've also had experiences in breath work, not the breath work modality that I use. So I am a breath work practitioner, but I went to like a holotropic breath work session, and it was so intense for my nervous system. And I had gone through so much trauma, and I didn't know, like I didn't do my own research. So I'll take personal responsibility for that. Like I should have done more research into it. I did sign the waiver. But anyways, I went there and I had a really intense release. And at first it felt like bliss, like it felt really good. But what happens is like a good way to explain it, and Peter Levine explains it this way. It's like when we have trauma that's locked and frozen in our body, we want to slowly unravel it, not all at once. So like what happened was like it unraveled all at once because my nervous system went from like being in this shutdown state to all of a sudden I shot up the ladder. And what a lot of people don't realize is so through somatic work, it's very common to feel worse before you get better. This is actually part of the process. So somatic healing is actually not about feeling better right away. It's getting better at feeling. And what happens is if you're in a frozen state, so your body's been shut down, you're numb, you don't feel things, you're very dissociated and disconnected, you actually have to move up the ladder through sympathetic before you get to ventral. So it's common to experience a lot of anxiety. So what happened to me after that breathwork session was all of a sudden I had extreme anxiety. I felt like I was at a heavy metal concert every single day. Like it was so intense. I started to actually have suicidal thoughts.
Oh,
and
wow.
at this point, I was like well into my journey where I was like, what's going on here? Like, I'm not suicidal. And I'm like, oh, this is a part that's come up from my past that hasn't yet been processed or integrated. So luckily, I understood that because I've been doing this work. Most people wouldn't know. Like they'd panic and they'd, go to the hospital, they go see a doctor. So I knew, I'm like, okay, I understand what's happening because I actually had an understanding of the nervous system and how this works. So then I went and I worked with a somatic practitioner at that point, and she actually helped me work through that.
Cool.
So yeah, it was very intense, but it was a lesson for me of like, yeah, you don't need to have these big dramatic experiences at first. Like there's medicine in gentleness, and slow is better.
That is literally my mantra now.
Definitely.
I know. I used my very first plant medicine ceremony because I had experimented with like mushrooms and MDMA and all of those things prior, but my very first ceremony was with iboga.
Intense.
Who does that?
The most intense medicine.
Who does that? Like, I don't know. But I mean, like, that's so. I had just finished like a 2.5-year stint working with this company called Mind Valley. which is all about personal growth and personal growth at that time. And I think it still is. And I've thought it was really interesting. I saw a post that you shared recently about why you're leaving the self-help space and personal development. But I was so ingrained in this must be type A, must push harder, must be equal or on par with like the Silicon Valley tech bros. Like that was very much the mentality at Mind Valley that time. And it was just push, 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 harder, harder, harder. And jumping headfirst into like these intense experiences, it was just like a badge of honor. And ultimately, that was just creating tons of dysregulation in my system that I'd have to deal with pretty dramatically later on in life. Yeah. What are your thoughts on, the personal growth industry and like why you're leaving?
Yeah, such a good topic. And I feel a lot of people are resonating with this. It was very, for me personally, I'll just speak from my own experience and why I no longer resonate with it. That was the beginning of my journey. So like throughout my 20s, I was very much involved in fitness and nutrition and personal development and achieving and being more. I mean, it was very much self-focused and self-obsessive.
Yeah.
And, initially it helped me feel better because I had more confidence because I had such low confidence to begin with. But all I was doing was going from the very deflated ego to the very inflated ego. Like it was just very self-absorbed. And for me, my path just looks different now. Like where my path is very much about like, connecting back to community, to nature, to being of service, reciprocity, like reverence, devotion. I now love the word devotion. I'm actually more, I don't like the word discipline, but I would say I'm more disciplined than I was then, but in a different way. Like it's a devotional practice where I'm committed to spirit. I'm committed to being of service. I'm committed to my work. I'm committed to doing practices that other people aren't going to notice I'm doing them unless they're doing them themselves, if that makes sense. So for an example, like in personal development and self-help, I was so focused on like having the perfect body because everyone would see that I had a perfect body, right? But now like letting that go and focusing on these deeper spiritual practices and being in ceremonies where no one knows I'm in ceremony because you don't share ceremony online, right? Like that's private. So no one knows these things. And so people notice them if they are doing the work too, because, we see other people who are also embodying what we're embodying. But there's things that you can't show for it. It's not about that. It's completely opposite, actually. But it takes more out of you. It takes more discipline and devotion out of you. So it's a different way to approach it. And for me, it's just been more fulfilling. I feel such a deeper connection to myself, to the world around me, to others, to spirit, to nature. Yeah, it's a whole different way of looking at the world.
That's so beautiful. Oh my gosh, we're almost at the end of our time already. I have so many more questions. We're going to have to do a round two. I really wanted to talk to you about, so I saw that you were celibate for 6 years.
Yeah.
I was celibate for 5. Yeah, let's do another episode maybe where we talk about that topic and red flags and boundaries and all of those things. I think there's a lot both of us could talk about around that. But we'll just leave with one more question. If somebody is listening, feeling like they're too broken or too stuck, what would you say to them?
Yeah. Just going to feel into that for a moment. And I just want to say, to start off, that I see you. I feel you. I know what that feels like, to feel like there's no way out and that you're too far gone. Like, why even bother starting? And I want you to know that, number one, we're never broken. Our body actually makes perfect sense. Our behaviors make perfect sense. Like they're incredible adapting coping mechanisms. I don't even like to call them maladaptive, but like even behaviors and things that we're doing, whether that's isolating, cutting ourselves off from the world, like feeling no motivation, like a loss of zest for life, it actually makes so much sense. It's your body protecting you. And so just like even acknowledging that, first of all, like not approaching healing from a place of that we're broken, but that actually we make perfect sense is the very first step. Like everything you're experiencing makes so much sense. And it just starts off with just reach out to somebody because we cannot do this alone. And so often when we're in that state, the last thing we want to do is to reach out to someone. Even when someone's telling you, reach out, ask for support, ask for help. And sometimes we can feel like we're being a burden on other people. And sometimes it's not the ones that we love in our lives that we're most closest to that we're meant to reach out to. But even if it's reaching out to, you know, someone online that you look up to for resources, or not even knowing, you know, where to go or where to start, like just asking someone. And then I always find that the pieces start to fall in place as soon as we take that first step. But we have to take that first step to be willing to want to see a way out, to be willing to want to get better. And then everything will just fall into place once we actually just take that first step of reaching out.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. It's true. You really aren't too broken. I've had many experiences of rock bottom where I just thought, this is it. Like, there's no coming back from it. But there is. That's polarity and duality. And when we experience those low, low, low lows, there's also really big highs on the other side too. And a lot of times we judge the low periods as being bad. But again, like, that's also your initiation.
Totally. The low periods were what got me to the high periods. Now I prefer just living in the middle.
Yeah.
I'm happy with living in the middle.
I would love that. I just want a life of like mediocrity now. Really.
Totally. 100%. But yeah, it's me and my friend were having a conversation the other day, and he's like, you know, it's always the people that you hear have these rock bottom stories that end up having like these incredible like comebacks and breakthroughs, because the reality is when you get through something like that most could never even fathom, when you get through that, nothing's that hard after that, you know? And it's like, I've been through still over the past several years, life doesn't get easier. Like, I actually would say, and I don't like to sound like cynical or anything like that, but it's not about life getting easier. It's about building our capacity to weather it and be with it. And I can just handle more than I used to be able to handle before. I've still had lows. Like, this past year was really hard for me. I had a really hard year, but I came out on the other side, and I just remind myself this too shall pass, because there's seasons for everything. There's going to be seasons of weathering the storms, and there's going to be seasons of summer and spring, and just being in and being with whatever season you're in, knowing that this too shall pass. The good will pass, the bad will pass. There's seasons for everything.
Yeah. And I'm a testament to that example as well. Just going through this last relationship shift that I've shared on the podcast 5 or 7 years ago, whenever the last one that I was in, when that ended cruelly and abruptly, just absolutely destroyed my nervous system. Like, it caused a whole 1.5 years of just extreme dysregulation and health issues. This time, it's so strange because it's great in a sense, but I feel like there's just so much more capacity in my system. Even though I know, like, I'm still experiencing a level of dysregulation because I have symptoms and stuff still from my event from last year. But yeah, it's really interesting to see how big of a change there has been. And the lack of victimhood and poor me and this was my fault, like, none of that is there anymore. Yeah. And there's just like this feeling of like, I got my own self, like I got my own back.
Totally.
You
That
know?
is the healing. I love that you shared that, because I think often people think like when we start to heal our relationship patterns, it means that we're no longer going to attract these types of relationships or these dynamics into our life. That's not true. I've still attracted a lot of these different types of dynamics into my life. I can catch them sooner, and I also rebound sooner from them. And that's just showing that I do have the capacity to be with rejection. I do have the capacity to be with things not always, turning out the way that I think they're going to. I do have the capacity to be willing to see where I was maybe lost in a golden projection, because I'm a human and I still do that, right? Like, I still will project this golden shadow onto someone. So, but it's being willing to see that and then move through it a lot quicker.
Yep. 100%. Growth, baby.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. So, for anybody listening that may want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, the best place is just my Instagram because I'm updating my website. So I gave it to you wrong because I changed my name recently, but it's Wild Feminine Rise now on Instagram.
Yep. Awesome. I will have that in the show notes. Thank you so much for this conversation today. It was lovely.
Thank you. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I think we should definitely do a round two.
Oh, we'll have to. We'll have
Okay.
to for sure.
Amazing. All right, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Make sure that you share. If you can leave a review on this podcast, it would be so, so, so helpful to get us out there and into more ears. And thank you again for listening. We'll catch you all on the next episode.
If this episode cracked you open, good. Share it far and wide so we can reach more people who are done pretending and ready to come home to themselves. And remember, if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts or tap the stars on Spotify, you'll be entered into my monthly draw for a bottle of my medicinal herbal oil. It's my way of saying thank you for helping this work reach more people who need it the most. I'll announce winners right here on the show. To dive deeper into my world, explore Wildcrafted Apothecary and Sacred Art at magicmaven.com. Discover new tools for nervous system healing at mindfulmeds.io, or bring your vision to life with me at the Brand Bruja. All the links and more are waiting for you in the show notes. Until next time, stay wild, stay rooted, and remember, you were made for this.